After spending 4 years in a high security federal prison, I was transferred to a camp. I spent my first year at FCI Dublin, which is in California, and then they transferred me on Conair, which is chains and shackles and just a miserable experience. I've shared another video about that. Then I landed in Minnesota, which is also a high security prison, so I'm behind a fence, everything's locked down, 10-minute moves, and then my caseworker calls me in about a year to the gate when I have about a year left and tells me they're going to transfer me to a camp in California. Well, I was excited because I'm going to be closer to my family, but I had no idea what to expect. So they picked me up in a car, which is scary for me anyway, and dropped me off at the front of the airport in Minnesota with nothing but my prison ID. I'm like so anxious and panicky. I finally find somebody to help me and take me to the plane. And when I sit down, I sit between two people who are both on their phones for 3 hours straight, didn't even acknowledge that I was there. And then I just felt so disconnected. Like in prison, when someone comes in, you're like, hi, how are you? What are you doing? How can I help you? It's just so confusing to me how disconnected we are out here. When I finally landed in California, I had to go find a taxi driver and ask him to give me a ride to the camp. And I said, hey, I need to get a ride to the prison. And he's like, why are you going to the prison? And I said, well, because that's where I live. And he goes, well, you're not a bad person, are you? I said, no, there's lots of good people in prison. So we had a pretty good conversation, and I was so relieved when we pulled up to that camp. When I walked in, I remember the officer saying, you look like one of the happiest people I've ever seen come into prison. Well, on top of the fact that it was January in Minnesota, and in California, the weather was nice, and I walked into a camp with palm trees, and I was just relieved. I still had about 7 months until the end of my sentence, and at the end of my sentence, I was anxious. Just leaving the prison, there's so much anxiety after spending that much time locked up, and we'll talk more about that on the next video.